When Donald Trump proposed selling a $5 million golden immigration card, he envisioned a new gateway to America, one reserved for the ultra-rich. "We're going to be selling a gold card," Trump said from the Oval Office. "You have a green card. This is a gold card, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card." But outside the gilded gates of America, millions are desperately trying to cross its borders, not aboard private jets, but on blistered feet, with empty stomachs and broken hearts. No one risks their life to reach the U.S. unless they've been pushed to the edge. Here are the 10 countries with the highest number of undocumented migrants trying to enter the U.S., and the deep-rooted reasons why they see no choice but to run. 1. Mexico, when the American dream becomes a fight to survive. Causes: organized violence, entrenched inequality, and a toxic alliance between political power and drug cartels. Mexico isn't just America's neighbor. It's a chaotic buffer zone between dreams and reality. For decades, successive governments have failed to establish a strong rule of law. Drug cartels have morphed into parallel governments, wielding brutal power in large swaths of the country. Politicians, police, and even mayors are often on the cartel payroll or end up dead for resisting. The middle class and the poor are increasingly shut out of basic services. When justice is reserved for the wealthy and violence becomes the only language that gets heard, millions of Mexicans flee, not in search of a better life, but to simply stay alive in a country unraveling from within. Over 5.2 million Mexicans are currently living in the U.S. without legal status. Despite increasingly strict border policies, more than 740,000 were apprehended in 2023 alone. That's over 2,000 people every single day. It's 2. Venezuela, from oil-rich paradise to the ashes of a collapsed state. Causes: failed populism, catastrophic governance, and the collapse of centralized power. Once the wealthiest country in South America, Venezuela thrived on its vast oil reserves. But under Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro, the nation adopted a symbolic form of Bolivarian socialism, an economic model built more on ideology than effectiveness, with the state controlling everything and no independent institutions to hold it accountable. When oil prices plummeted and populist policies went off the rails, Venezuela's economy collapsed like a skyscraper with no foundation. Healthcare, education, infrastructure, all fell apart. Worse, dissent became a punishable offense. Journalists, lawyers, even peaceful protesters were jailed without trial. More than 7 million people have fled in a decade, making it one of the largest migration crises in modern history. They're not chasing the American dream. They're escaping a waking nightmare. Over 334,000 Venezuelans were apprehended at the U.S. border in 2023. Many of them were once educated professionals with stable careers. But when life back home became hopeless, they had no choice but to trek through deadly jungles like the Darien Gap, chasing just a sliver of hope in the land of the free. 3. Guatemala, a nation eroded from its roots. Causes: civil war legacy, racial inequality, and the systemic corruption of the state. Guatemala bears one of Latin America's bloodiest histories, a 36-year civil war, 1960 to 1996, claimed over 200,000 lives, mostly from the indigenous Maya population. Though the war is over, the wounds remain. Indigenous communities are still marginalized, economically and politically. Corruption runs so deep that even the courts are manipulated by the elite and the political right. Anti-poverty and crime reduction programs exist only on paper. Meanwhile, gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18 have turned neighborhoods into war zones. With over 300,000 Guatemalans apprehended at the U.S. border in 2023, the country isn't a place where people dream of the future. It's a place they flee to escape the past. 4. Honduras. When government becomes a ghost and law exists only on paper. Causes: collapse of the rule of law, gang-controlled communities, and half-baked crime policies. Honduras once held the unwanted title of murder capital of the world, with homicide rates 20 times the global average. MS-13 and Barrio 18 aren't just gangs, they're rulers. Towns and suburbs are their kingdoms, where residents pay protection money just to stay alive. Police and military forces have either been bought off or are utterly powerless. Since the 2009 coup that ousted President Manuel Zelaya, Honduras has spiraled into political chaos. Elections are tainted with fraud, courts lack independence, and human rights violations are systemic. Faith in government is gone. Faith in reform is dead. Over 200,000 Hondurans were detained at the U.S. border in 2023, not because they were poor, but because staying meant slowly dying in silence. 5. Nicaragua, when a dictatorship rises in the heart of Central America, causes political totalitarianism, mass arrests, and the eradication of civil society. Since 2018, Nicaragua, under President Daniel Ortega, has morphed from a fragile democracy into a full-blown dictatorship. Student protests were crushed with lethal force. Hundreds were killed or disappeared. Independent media, NGOs, and even Catholic clergy were shut down or jailed under accusations of national security threats. Justice was twisted, the Constitution distorted, and dissent criminalized. Over 160,000 Nicaraguans fled in 2023 alone. They left silently, no slogans, no gunfire, just tearful eyes and quiet suitcases. In a country where silence is enforced at gunpoint, escaping becomes the last brave act left. 6. El Salvador. When both sides are brutal, it's the people who bleed causes. A battle between rising authoritarianism and the ghosts of organized crime. President Nayib Bukele's government is a global paradox. He claims to have eradicated gangs through mass arrests, with tens of thousands in prison. But in the process, he dismantled democratic checks, neutered the judiciary, abolished term limits, and silenced dissent. Salvadorans are caught in the crossfire between the lingering terror of gangs and the iron fist of the state. With over 150,000 detained at the U.S. border in 2023, their exodus isn't just an escape from violence. It's a flight from a political system that values power more than justice and security more than freedom. 7. Colombia, peace was never the finish line, just a broken promise causes. Post-conflict power vacuums, rural abandonment, and a new wave of armed groups. The 2016 peace deal with FARC was hailed as a milestone, but when guerrillas laid down their arms, the government failed to step in. New cartels rearmed FARC factions, and criminal groups seized control of rural areas, turning them into lawless gray zones. Colombia's economy has stalled, inflation is high, and farmers without land are left with nothing. With over 130,000 Colombians apprehended at the U.S. border in 2023, the migration wave reveals the cracks in a fragile peace. Because if peace means only the absence of war, but not the presence of justice, then it's not peace. It's a pause before the next storm. 8. Haiti. When a country ceases to exist as a state causes total state collapse, humanitarian catastrophe, and armed gang control. Haiti no longer fits the basic definition of a sovereign nation. There's no functioning government, no capable security force, no working legal system. Armed gangs control up to 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Rape, murder, and kidnappings are daily realities, with no investigations, no arrests. People have no choice but to flee, but Haiti doesn't border the U.S. Most travel first to South America, then trek across jungles, deserts, and war zones to reach the southern U.S. border. With over 126,000 Haitians detained in 2023, their journey is more than a statistic. It's living proof that when a state collapses, no one is a citizen anymore. 9. Ecuador. When a peaceful nation falls into a drug war spiral, causes cartel violence, loss of government control, and geopolitical shifts in drug trafficking routes. In less than 3 years, Ecuador went from a haven of peace to a narco battleground. Once symbols of order, the country's prisons have turned into ground zero for gang wars. Mexican and Colombian cartels now dominate neighborhoods and ports. As Ecuador became a key transit hub, the drug trade dragged everyone into its orbit, from farmers to police officers, mayors to journalists. Over 100,000 Ecuadorians were detained in 2023 at the U.S. border, a sign not just of fear, but of a society buckling under a new criminal map reshaping Latin America. 10. China. When personal freedom becomes a luxury, causes deep economic crisis, extreme social control, and the quiet collapse of hope. For years, China promised prosperity in exchange for personal freedom. But now, with youth unemployment above 20%, a collapsed real estate market, and private enterprises under siege, that promise is crumbling. Add to that a hyper-surveillance state where every word, action, even silence, can be scored, judged, and punished. In 2023, over 24,000 Chinese nationals were caught at the U.S. border. Many flew to visa-free Ecuador, then trekked through the deadly Darien jungle. No one takes that route for fun. They walk because there's no room left to dream. And dreams, if not allowed to grow, eventually become reasons to flee. A migration map, a map of broken nations. While one side of America debates $5 million golden visas for the elite, the other side of the world is crumbling, where millions don't even have a safe place to sleep. Undocumented migration isn't a choice. It's despair, dressed as hope. Each step across the border isn't just a broken passport. It's a cry for help from nations that can no longer protect their own.